Today is May 28, 2016, and we're coming to the end of the Feast of Unleavened Bread of the second month, which is
today's the last day.
Okay, I was thinking that today was
at sunset it ends.
Yeah. We have that, so tomorrow night should actually just be a regular social meeting then.
Okay.
Although everyone should continue on studying the community rule, of course. And there's just so much that we have to learn from this. So, that's what we've been doing, studying the community rule, and we're going to continue that tonight. So before we begin, let us ask our Heavenly Family to guide us. Heavenly Family, thank you so much for everything. Thank you for this wonderful feast of Passover and unleavened bread of the second month. And thank you for guiding us to continue on the investigation of the community rule. Help us to understand this subject. Please make it clear in our minds. Help us to discern whether this is something that we ought to pattern our lives after. Please guide us in this meeting to settle into the principles of truth and really to all the principles of truth. Help us to practice true and honest investigation, to have our minds working in right lines, thinking according to genuine reason. Thank you so much, Heavenly Family. Guide us, bind us together in love. Help us to view all things through your eyes. That's, of course, as they really are. Thank you so very much. Father, Mother, we ask these things. Hashem Tzemach Huahi.
Amen.
Amen. And again, that's Bashem Tzemach Huahi is in the name of branch, he and she. All right, so back to the community rule. We've been looking at the section about the two ways or the two spirits. And we're in the paragraph that starts at 1QS, column 3, line 17 or 18. I'm not sure what the exact line number is because I'm looking at it in Giza Vermez's translation, which only gives the lines for every 5 lines. So it'll have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and so on. So I'll read this paragraph again, and we will continue on our discussion of it and our investigation to see whether it is true. So this is how it starts. He, referring to God, has created humanity to govern the world and has appointed for them 2 spirits with which they may walk until the time of his visitation. They are the spirits of truth and falsehood. From the source of light come all the generations of truth, and from the source of darkness come all the generations of falsehood. In the hand of the Prince of Light is the dominion over all the children of righteousness. In the way of light they walk, and in the hand of the messenger of darkness is the dominion over all the children of falsehood. In the way of darkness they walk. From the messenger of darkness stems the corruption of all the children of righteousness. All their sin, iniquities, wickedness, and all their unlawful deeds are at his prompting. God, in his mysteries, allows this until his era dawns. And all their afflictions and seasons of distress are caused by his diabolical rule. And all the spirits allied with him share but a single resolve: to cause the children of light to fall. So we've discussed the majority of this paragraph so far. The last sentence that we looked at is the sentence that says, "From the messenger of darkness stems the corruption of all the children of righteousness. All their sin, iniquities, wickedness, and all their unlawful deeds are at his prompting." And we did read in connection with that, God in his mysteries allows this until his era dawns, though perhaps there's more to discuss in regard to that sentence. So I just wanted to ask, does anyone have any questions or any comments on this paragraph as a whole, or on the last sentence that we were discussing last night? And if not, then we can move on to the next sentence. So anyone? All right, so we'll take that as there are no comments or questions concerning what we have already gone through here. So the next sentence, again, it's referring to the previous sentence, the one that we looked at last night, or the last of the ones that we looked at last night, which says, "The messenger of darkness," or "from the messenger of darkness stems the corruption of all the children of righteousness. All their sin, iniquities, wickedness, and all their unlawful deeds are at his prompting." Then the next sentence says, "God, in his mysteries, allows this until his era dawns." So God, in his mysteries, allows this until his era dawns. Are there any comments upon that sentence? I'll ask a question for you guys. According to this statement, what era are we in now?
The era in which it's still allowed that the angel of darkness is allowed to lead the children of righteousness astray if they choose.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with that. In other words, this places the era of God in the future. And so it's, the era in which the angel of darkness or the messenger of darkness is still leading people astray and prompting people to do sin and wickedness and all these unlawful deeds and so on. It reminds me of another statement earlier in the community rule in 1QS column 1, line 19, which talks about entering the covenant. And this is what it says, going back to, maybe this is actually going back to line 16 or 17. It says, "All those who embrace the community rule shall enter into the covenant before God, agreeing to obey all his commandments, and not to stray from following him out of any fear, terror, or persecution during the dominion of Belial." So that's implying that the time in which this is written and the time in which the community rule most specifically applies is during the quote-unquote dominion of Belial. And it's referring to that as a particular period of time in which Belial has the dominion. And then over here in column 3 that we are examining, there is the messenger of darkness doing all these things, prompting people towards sin, iniquity, wickedness, and so on. And God, in his mysteries, allows this until his era dawns. So this is showing the general idea that the present age is one of darkness and wickedness, in which wicked gods are ruling, but that this era will come to an end, that there will be an era of light, of truth, of righteousness, in which the wicked gods no longer rule. The dominion of Belial shall be over, and our heavenly family shall have the day, as it were. This is really important. It's, in one sense, it's one of the, you could almost call it a tenet of apocalypticism. It is one of the things which, as branches, and obviously the writers of the Dead Sea Scrolls and all of these things, that we've come to understand that, okay, yes, there's a day that we've been in for a long time in which the enemy of souls appears to be winning and has dominion over the people of the earth. But that day is not going to last forever. And there is a new era right around the corner. Are there any comments or questions concerning that idea?
Well, we can hasten the day, right?
Amen. Absolutely.
So if this everlasting covenant is established at this time, and enough people accept righteousness from our heavenly family and take the message to enough people, then, if the wave sheep is made up and 144,000 is made up and the harvest really takes off, then the day is here, right?
Absolutely, yeah. The day of truth. There's another section coming, let's see, where is it? Yes. This is later on, coming to the end of the section on the two spirits. And how it says here that, God allows this until his era dawns. And earlier it said, how did it put it? Talks about the time of his visitation. Until it says, and has appointed for them two spirits in which they may walk until the time of his visitation. Later in 1QS column 4, around line, 17, it says, truth abhors the works of falsehood, and falsehood abhors all the ways of truth. And their contention is fierce in all their arguments, for they do not walk together. But in the mysteries of his understanding and in his glorious wisdom, God has ordained an end for falsehood, and at the time of the visitation, he will destroy it forever. Then truth, which has wallowed in the ways of wickedness during the dominion of falsehood until the appointed time of judgment, shall arise in the world forever. How beautiful. It's just what promise. Any other comments or questions before we move on to the next sentence? The last comment that I'll make in regard to this sentence is that it's essentially a parenthetical note. If you drop out that sentence, going from the sentence before it to the sentence after it actually flows better. This is an interruption in the thought. So from the messenger of darkness stems the corruption, so on and so forth. And then you skip the sentence we just read, and it says, and all their afflictions and seasons of distress are caused by his diabolical rule. Okay, well, let's continue on talking about what it was in the sentence before the sentence that we just went through. That being, God in his mysteries allows this until his era dawns. That sentence interrupts the thought, and actually, continuing on in the next sentence, it could be read when it says, and all their afflictions and seasons of distress are caused by his diabolical rule. Well, with that sentence just before this one, it could be read as saying the diabolical rule is God's diabolical rule. But that's clearly not the meaning of the context. It's clearly continuing on from the sentence before. But I wanted to mention that just that we can recognize that this sentence is essentially a parenthetical note. And of course, in the way that Giza Vermes translated it, it lessens the chance of interpreting it as it being God's diabolical rule or something like that. But there are other points that become less clear in translating it the way that he did. So the next sentence is, and all their afflictions and seasons of distress are caused by his diabolical rule. Any comments or questions on that sentence?
I agree with that statement.
Toda.
No, I know that, and they've been caused by me following his diabolical rule or accepting his rule in my life. The spirit of darkness, the angel of darkness, and it'll be good to be freed from him and freed from my own carnal heart.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes me think that the kings of this world, when they don't have any more subjects, then they're really not kings anymore.
So true. Yeah, that's one of the things that our Heavenly Family was bringing to light during the Feast of Tabernacles 2013, how the way that our Heavenly Family seeks to end the dominion of the wicked gods is simply to invite people who are in their dominion to leave it. And, yeah, I mean, when they have no more subjects, and when they have fewer and fewer subjects, their kingdom starts to fall apart. So that's kind of this whole thing. And right now, just thinking back to Mary's comment, yeah, this is what we're looking at, what we're looking for. This is kind of the purpose of this whole thing. And the message from our Heavenly Family to us is that today is the day of salvation. It's that the reign of the wicked gods, the end of it is starting now. And it already has begun. And there's places in the Dead Sea Scrolls which talk about this, and the wicked gods trembling for fear. And also Isaiah chapter 40 to 44, in the passages that we went through last year, this is really, one of the main ideas there, that the reign of the wicked gods is at its end. Yeah, they don't all of a sudden suddenly, totally lose power in the world or anything like that. No, there's a gradual downfall because people don't all exit their kingdom at once. It's kind of like, I'll mention something that I've mentioned a number of times on previous calls. I saw a picture that someone posted online at one point that said, "I have just as much authority as the Pope, only fewer people believe it." And of course, the thought is that the Pope doesn't have any true authority. It's just that people believe that he does. And because of that, he gains what could be called practical authority. Even though it's unjust authority, it's not genuine authority. It's practical authority, as in he's able to exercise power over people. With the wicked gods, it's the same sort of situation. It's just more subtle. People follow their ways, thinking that they are held in those ways, thinking that we have to live in this certain way, or we are compelled to in some way, when really we're not. There is nothing which can actually keep us to continue in sin, which again, sin is the ways of the wicked gods. Nothing can keep us there other than lies. And if we think that there's something that can keep us there, something real, something substantial, that's what will keep us there. Just our belief, our misconception. And so, in other words, their ways have no true power to bind us. If we only depend on our heavenly family and accept the truth as they reveal it to us, then there's no way. If we truly accept their truth, which is, Ellen White says that the righteousness of Christ is pure, unadulterated truth. So if we accept the truth as it really is, we accept the righteousness of Christ. And we just simply need to abide in the truth. And so long as we abide in the truth, error can hold no sway over us. It can simply hold no sway, and we won't be worshiping the wicked gods. So that's, at the end of the day, that's the solution. To accept our Heavenly Family's testimony concerning ourselves and to allow them to give us an experience of their love, and then to abide in their love and abide in their truth.
Amen. Praise God for that.
Amen.
We were listening to the study on Psalm 35 this afternoon, and it makes me think of this because, when David cried out in distress to be delivered from his persecutors, then our sister brings the truth. And it's so kind of surreal, I guess, but it's like that's what's happening right this very minute.
Amen. Yeah, this is the idea that our Heavenly Family right now is shining these bright beams of truth right on us, as I think John last night mentioned a similar type of image. They're shining this light on us, and if we just remain in it, don't kick it out of our minds, don't remove ourselves from it. No, abide in the truth. Every moment of every day, just abide in the truth. That's the solution. It sounds so simple, and it really is. And sure, there are temptations that can come along, but so long as we abide in the truth, the lies which lay at the foundation of every temptation will not overcome us. It's kind of like how it says in John chapter 1, how darkness has not mastered the light, has not overcome it. And it never will. It never can.
It's so simple a child can understand it.
Amen. Okay, so this statement that we just read, I'll read it again. And all their afflictions and seasons of distress are caused by his diabolical rule. So, the messenger of darkness is ruling, and his rule is diabolical. Does everyone here understand what it means for his rule to be diabolical?
No, what is diabolical?
Devilish.
Okay, Teresa just said devilish, and I think
Diabolo, from the word diabolo, which is, I think, the Spanish word for devil.
Yeah. Devilish, overwhelmingly evil or cruel, that sort of thing. I don't have an exact definition in front of me, but it's kind of, if you use the word hate, that sounds bad, but abhor is just a stronger word. It's in one sense a more intense hatred. Diabolical is just like absolute wickedness, evil. Devilish, I think, is an excellent way to describe it.
I was going to just say real quick, I think it also involves, calculated planning. So it's evil that's actually calculated and planned out.
Okay. Well, anyway, this certainly paints a picture. It's a very negative picture. It's a very negative rule that this angel of darkness or messenger of darkness is causing. And, it's talking about afflictions and seasons of stress and how all of these things are caused by his diabolical rule. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? About the fact or the claim that this is making that the afflictions and seasons of distress are caused by his diabolical rule?
I just agree with it.
Okay. I know that many people have the thought that anything bad that happens is basically just a test from God. That sort of thing. This kind of paints a different picture. Here it's actually the messenger of darkness which is causing all of these bad things. But then it says that God in his mysteries allows this until his era dawns. And then the next paragraph says that, but the God of Israel and the messenger of his truth helps all the children of light. So they help the children of light. So it's the way that this paints a picture is that it's actually the messenger of darkness who causes all these bad things, but that God and the angel of truth, they allow it and they help. They bring something good out of it. And I know at one point I kind of thought along the lines, at least, maybe not fully, but along the lines that, bad things that happen are really brought about by God for some greater good. But then, more and more, I came to realize that, there are a lot of things that happen in this world that our Heavenly Family has nothing to do with in terms of causing it. But they only try to prevent certain things, and then they try to bring the best out of bad situations. And they are absolutely masterful at bringing the best out of bad situations. And so that itself is very comforting. And some people think that it's less comforting than the thought that God is just bringing about everything. But I'd say that that's not very comforting, to think that God is just bringing about everything, because if that's the case, we have a very, I'll just say, a very messed up God, if God is bringing about all the bad things that take place in the world.
I have a question. The story of Job, where, God allows, even within a boundary, Satan to have a go at Job. That was always just a very super interesting story to me, because, God had, protected Job also. He couldn't mess with Job's health, and he couldn't take Job's life until a certain point. Then he said, all right, fine, you can mess with Job's health. And that was just always just a really curious story to me. So I don't know how.
Yeah, very.
Like it's saying that, the community rule is saying that God is allowing, the spirit of darkness to be in our midst, I suppose, because he was allowing the spirit of darkness to be in Job's midst. And Job, I don't think he fell. He kind of got put in his place at the end. But I know that also Job did commit some sins. He said, "The thing I have feared most has come upon me," which God says, "Fear not." But obviously, he was fearing, the destruction of his children, because that's what happened to him. And that always really stuck out to me as a dangerous thing to do, is to fear calamity, I guess.
Yeah, so you're just kind of like wondering how the whole Job circumstance relates to this and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, it seems like the Job circumstance is just a good example of this sort of thing. That, this is saying that God allows it and these things happen. The Job circumstance, of course, shows, limitations to that, like you've mentioned. And here in the community rule, it doesn't state it in those terms or expound on it by means of example, like we find in Job itself, but by saying that the God of Israel and the angel of his truth help all the sons of light. It's showing that it's not that they just allow whatever. It's not like they stand back in indifference, but that they are actually involved. So, to me, this looks like one is, an example of what is, Job is basically an example of the sort of thing that it describes here in the community rule. I don't know if there's anything more specific or anything, if I missed part of your question, if there's something more specific that you're wondering about. But
just that,
that's
God had even put parameters on spirit of darkness. This has always made me wonder about things. But like you had just said too, it's kind of like the four, the angels holding back the four winds of strife. I just mentioned that there's two sides, to every scenario that we're going through. There's, the spirit of darkness obviously is allowed, but the spirit of light also is working with us as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's, it's kind of the idea of not being tempted beyond what we're able to bear. There are limitations on what the enemy can do at the present time. And so, yeah, I mean, that's all part of the mercy of our Heavenly Family, and that is perhaps largely and perhaps almost wholly due to the intercession of Christ before the Heavenly Council, because Christ can truly claim this world as his own. But as people refuse to be in his kingdom and they worship wicked gods, well, it's kind of our Heavenly Family allows it to go on because people refuse to enter their kingdom. But our Heavenly Family does have the right to put limitations on things, and they do. So we can be totally grateful for that. Any other comments?
Along those same lines, then let me understand again. Satan is the one who's out here doing all these horrible things to mankind, trying to discourage us from walking with God and to make us sin and disbelieve God and all of these things. And God sometimes steps in and puts limitations on what he can do in our lives. Is that what I'm understanding is the truth?
Yeah, that's certainly part of the picture. I'll expand a little bit on the aspect of sometimes steps in. That may be part of it, where there might be a way that our Heavenly Family enforces things, but it also there could just be the aspect of there being limitations that have been set and have been in place for however long. And, that those limitations are known, like kind of boundaries or rules that are there that the devil and the other wicked gods know they are not supposed to transgress those boundaries. And then there may be other circumstances where there is discussion on it, just like in, I think it's in 1 Kings 22 with Micaiah, the prophet, and there was discussion in the Heavenly Council as to what should happen, and so that was a specific incident where it's like, okay, well, what should happen here? And there's a divine council meeting on that issue, and then it's decided. So it'll have either something will be permitted or not permitted, and if it's permitted, what are the limitations of what can be done? So you have those various aspects, but it seems to be that there would be some general things that are just understood as in, hey, you can't go this far. And so, yeah, I know that, I don't know how much the wicked gods respect those boundaries, and there's a few places where Ellen White talks about this, how, the war is still on. It's still raging all around us. And, yeah, I mean, it's, there are times where our Heavenly Family sends their messengers to do different things, and wicked gods and their messengers try and prevent it. And there's battle, and, yeah, it's, in one sense, there's just a lot going on that we just don't even see, but there's a lot to it.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to understand the concept because I hear people, say many times, oh, God is doing this in my life and it's something bad, or God's allowing this to happen or something, and I just wonder, what is it that really is? What is the reality of it so that I can share some truth of some sort with them? That's all I was trying to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hope that helped somewhat, and if there's more, we can discuss it more if need be.
Well, I guess that's probably going to be the answer, and I'll just pray about it. Because every situation, I think, will be different, with each person.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other comments from anyone on this last sentence that we went through? All right.
Where are you at?
We are in the community rule in 1QS, column 3, and I think we're at about line 24. We're going to read the last little part here in the paragraph that starts with, "He has created man to govern the world." So we're in Giza Vermez's translation, we're about to read the last part of the last sentence of that paragraph.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. So I'll read it. First I'll read it in Giza Vermez's translation, and then I'll read it as I have it written down here. So Giza Vermez says, "For all his allotted spirits seek the overthrow of the sons of light." So this is an alternative translation. "And all the spirits allied with him share but a single resolve, to cause the children of light to fall." So that's saying, of course, that there are spirits who are allied with the messenger of darkness, and they all share that one purpose, that is to cause the children of light to fall. Any comments?
It's a good thing we've got an army on our side.
Amen.
Well, I'm also thinking that word spirits may also include man. Because if our spirit is not on the side of God, then we're technically also allied with him in some fashion to cause the children of light to fall as well. Because if we're still in his kingdom, then he can use us to, cause another person harm of some sort.
Yeah, absolutely. The word spirits or spirit just means breathing one or breathing ones. So, yeah, it could definitely include that. I don't know for sure, one way or the other, in this circumstance. It does seem to be that there are writings that use this word spirits to refer to beings who are not mortal. It'll contrast spirits with mortal beings. And so if that's the idea here, then it's, talking about those who don't have this mortal, just temporary, short lifespan, all of that sort of thing. But breathing ones in the sense that, hey, they have life, they're continuing to live, the idea of immortality. So I don't know if anyone has anything one way or the other that would help us to know what the case is. However, I will say that regardless of what the particular idea is in that passage, that the idea that you just conveyed, Rebecca, is either way, whether that's what this passage is talking about or not, that's certainly the truth. It's absolutely the truth. So any other comments on that?
Well, I was just going to add that could happen as long as God allows it to happen, unless he puts the brakes on for whatever reason that he's protecting that other person from what it sounded like earlier.
Yeah, certainly true. Well, I don't know if we're going to do this during this call or not. I suppose we could. But in terms of kind of identifying what this verse is talking about when it says, and all the spirits allied with him, if we wanted to find out if it's trying to convey the idea of, anyone, including humans, or if it's talking about what people might think of as divine beings or just non-human, non-earthly beings. One of the ways that we could do that, of course, is to look through the community rule and see when it uses the word spirit or spirits. Is it just talking about non-human, non-earthly beings, or are there times where it is also speaking of human beings, and we could check things like the Thanksgiving hymns. So that's one thing that we can do now if we need to. The other option is for us to just keep our eyes open for it as we're reading the community rule, as we read the Thanksgiving hymns and related literature, and then at some point, then that would help to inform our understanding. So do you guys want us to do that now, or shall we continue on our investigation?
We can just continue on if you like.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine either way. Anyone else have thoughts on that?
I agree. Let's continue.
Okay, sure. So are there any other comments on this paragraph before we move on to the next one? All right, I shall read the next paragraph. And bless us, Heavenly Family. Help us to understand this. But the God of Israel and the messenger of his truth help all the children of light. For it is he who created the spirits of light and darkness. And upon them are built every deed, and upon them are founded every work, and upon their paths all actions. One, God loves for all eternal ages, and in all her deeds he is pleased forever. The other he abhors, her counsel and all her paths he hates for all time. Okay. Any comments on that paragraph as a whole?
Those first two sentences are very interesting. The idea that he created the spirits of light and darkness and founded every action upon them. I'm going to be interested to see what we decide about that.
Yeah, very interesting. So I guess we'll start with the first sentence, and then we'll move on to the next one, which is where that issue is found. So, but the God of Israel and the messenger of his truth help all the children of light. So that, to me, that kind of belongs, or at least it continues on naturally from the content of the previous paragraph. So does anyone have comments on this sentence?
Praise the Heavenly Family. It's good news.
Amen. It is absolutely good news.
Is the God of Israel, and is the God of Israel referring to Christ? It sounds like the branch, the co-work of the branch there.
Well, I think that is an excellent question. There are a number of titles or you could say figures that show up within the past number of paragraphs. Would anyone like to kind of just list off some of these, titles that we find of different beings, and then we can discuss them?
Are you saying different names for God in the community rule? Different titles?
No, different titles of different beings. So, for instance, one of them is the messenger of darkness.
There's the God of knowledge, 2 paragraphs up.
Okay, so we have the messenger of darkness, the God of knowledge,
Angel of truth.
Darkness.
Okay, the angel of truth. There's another one someone mentioned.
The angel of darkness.
Okay, angel of darkness, which is just another translation of messenger of darkness.
Right.
The Prince of Light.
Prince of light. And then, of course, we have God of Israel, which is in the sentence that we were just reading. And there's another one earlier, not in this section on the 2 ways of the 2 spirits, but in the last paragraph of the previous section, we have the Spirit of Holiness, or the Holy Spirit. So these are all kind of different titles that we find of different beings. So the question is, are these beings to be equated? Are they to be distinct one from another? How are we to view these various titles? So I'll ask, could anyone point out 2 titles that are definitely not referring to the same person?
Well, I was thinking God of Israel might be the Father, and his angel of truth would be Christ. Or possibly,
All right.
Possibly the sister, but I was thinking of Christ first.
So I think in order to get the correct understanding of this sort of thing, we have to employ the same sort of means or method of investigation as we have in many other times, where what we have to do first is to just look at the words that are used within the community rule, see what is equated, what is distinguished, just keeping within that, not worrying about the interpretation of it yet, what it might mean, but just kind of the different phrases that it uses and how it sets up the differences and similarities and so on. And then we can go from there to potentially understanding who is who, sort of thing, in terms
the
of
God of Israel. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say the God of Israel and his angel of truth are obviously 2 different beings. Because
Okay,
his angel of truth couldn't be the same thing because it's his, belonging to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so the God of Israel, his angel of truth, or the angel of his truth is, I think, a more accurate way to translate that. But even there, it's clearly distinguishing between the God of Israel and the angel of his truth. Are there any other 2 titles that we can know for sure are distinct one from another?
Definitely the Prince of Light and the Angel of Darkness are obviously opposed.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good distinction to make. The Prince of Light, the Angel of Darkness. In that paragraph, the last one that we went through, they are really the 2 titles that are placed as kind of being really antithetical to one another. They're the opposing forces. How about the God of Israel and the Angel of Darkness?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could all agree on that. They're definitely not the same. How about the God of Israel and the God of knowledge?
I think of them as the same.
Yeah, I would say they're probably the same, because like God of Israel, it says, for He created, and then in the start of the first part, He created man to govern the world. Oh, I'm sorry, that's God of knowledge.
Yeah, so there, with when it mentions the God of knowledge, it says, from the God of knowledge comes all that is and shall be. And it talks about how He was the one who ordered all these different things, and He created mankind. And then later, when it gets to the God of Israel, it says, for it is He who created the spirits of light and darkness, and so on. It kind of seems to, it's using the same type of language for the God of knowledge as it uses for the God of Israel. What do you guys think in terms of where it says the angel of His truth, or His angel of truth, and the Prince of Light? Are those talking about the same being or separate beings?
Well, it could be the same, because truth and light are synonymous.
Okay.
The more I think about it, this angel of truth, because it says I don't know what word you use, but this one says will succor all the sons of light. That sounds like, and so maybe that's the sister, since he does the job of being the comforter and writing the Bible, being responsible for the Bible. Isn't that right? Do I have that right, that she was the one that inspired the Bible writers?
Well, first I just want to mention how, in order to really understand this, it's important to not be thinking in terms of, is this Jesus? Is this Sister Wisdom? Is this, that sort of thing? Because that's kind of going to interpreting the passages when we need to even understand first within this passage. Because, we come at it from the belief of Jesus and all that, but this is written before Jesus, the man, was around. So whoever wrote this didn't know about Jesus. They may not have known about the daughter. They didn't necessarily have the same type of thinking that we do. So it's important for us, before we can even see if it's even applicable, or just to see if it can be understood within our framework, we have to see what is the situation within their own framework. So they have to say, okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so it's really important when we're reading this to just look within, what can we discern from the passage itself? And before we bring in other thoughts that aren't present into the passage and bring them in, it's important to really see, what does this passage of itself say, and then we can see if we can even bring in something from elsewhere.
So you mentioned, Christ hadn't been born yet, but does that mean they didn't know about him? Because he was known from the days when they were expelled, or before they were left the garden, that he would come someday. So wouldn't the writers of the community rule have known of him, possibly? I think they did.
Of who exactly?
Christ.
Okay, so it depends on what exactly you mean by that. The word Christ, it's the Messiah or the Anointed One. The people who were part of the community of Qumran understood the idea of a Messiah, and they believed that there would be a Messiah and potentially even more than one Messiah. but they didn't necessarily believe that that Messiah was the Son of God. They didn't necessarily believe that that Messiah would be human. In other words, they didn't have the understanding of things that we have. And so we can't very well understand what they meant when we bring in aspects that they weren't familiar with. So it's important as a starting point. You know, it's not to say that we can never take these things and apply it in terms of what we understand, but it's to say that what is so necessary and important to do before any of that is to see what this of itself says. Just like, you know, there's been many times where we've gone through passages and I'll ask a question, you know, well, who is it in this passage who said such and such a thing? Mm-hmm. And often people will say, oh, well, maybe this person or that person, when really the answer that we're looking for is right there. You know, it's not, you know, maybe the passage might not tell us whether it's the father or the mother or the son or the daughter or anything like that. But it says, Yahweh said. And when we're in the habit of just thinking, oh, well, this or that, without actually paying attention to what the passage itself says, we often miss so much. And also, just being in that habit just kind of brings us to the point of either just interpreting privately or speculating about, well, maybe it's this or maybe it's that, when we have to start from the ground up. We have to get just what this says, and then if we bring in anything from any other passage, we have to show legitimate connections between that other passage and this, and show that, hey, this can actually be brought together justly, rather than, you know, kind of just bringing in elements or jumping over the necessary steps to see what this of itself is saying. So does that make sense?
To a great extent, although I'm still a little confused. I thought from the first sacrifice that was ever made, and from then on, that the people were taught every day of the sacrifices being done that the Son of God would come someday, the actual Son of God. And I thought Adam and Eve understood that, you know, the Son of God that they visited with every day, you know, was actually going to give his life for them. And so I just assumed that, you know, writers of this in this community here would have known. Although I do understand that the Jews in his day didn't understand necessarily that the Messiah would be the Son of God. Even his disciples, we know now, didn't really understand that. So, but I did think that it was understood that the Son of God would come and give his life for mankind. Now, what they understood past that, I wasn't sure. But, yeah, so I was a little confused about that.
Okay, well, in terms of Adam and Eve, that is thousands of years before the community rule. The community rule is a lot closer to the time of Jesus. You know, this is maximum, 200 years before the time of Jesus. And it's so it's a lot more in that context. This is Second Temple times, just like the time of Jesus was Second Temple times. But, I think whether Adam and Eve understood something, that's something we don't have that much information about as to how much they understood. And then beyond that, I understand that it can, or often people assume that there was a certain understanding that was passed down for however long, but we'd have to say, what evidence do we have concerning what people understood about a Messiah or deliverer or anything like that, or if people did understand that, yes, there was God, and God had a son, and that the son would be sent, things like that, we'd have to have evidence in order to demonstrate that that was the case. And if that was the case, when was it the case, and for whom was it the case? So yeah, I think those are the sorts of things that we'd have to really demonstrate, because yeah, other than that, it would just be kind of assuming that to be the case.
I have a comment.
Sure.
It talks about the God of Israel in the paragraph that we're on, and then it goes on to attribute that being to creation, or attributing creation to that being. And then when it talks about the God of knowledge, the same thing, that everything from the God of knowledge, everything that is and shall be. And so if the writer of this document didn't understand that Christ took part in the creation, then I would think he would be referring to the God of Israel and the God of knowledge as the same person.
Sure. Yeah. And I think just like you're pointing out, the terminology there of creation being attributed to both, it seems to be referring to the God of knowledge and the God of Israel as the same person. And so far as the angel of his truth and the Prince of Light, the only comment so far on that has been that they're potentially the same. Does anyone else have more comments on that one way or the other? Well, I'll mention an additional aspect, and you guys can let me know what you think of it. Okay, so we already saw that in the previous paragraph, two titles are juxtaposed one to another. They're set at odds, and they are contrasted with one another. We have the Prince of Light, and we have the Angel of Darkness. They're kind of set as opposites. And then it focuses, for the last half of the paragraph, for the most part, on the Angel of Darkness and his diabolical rule, and how he and all the spirits with him seek to overthrow the children of light. And then, continuing on in that same sort of context, says, but the God of Israel and the angel of his truth help all the children of light. So there you have the angel of his truth working against the angel of darkness. So that seems to have the phrase angel of truth being juxtaposed with angel of darkness as well. So does that have any implications one way or the other in terms of whether the angel of his truth and the Prince of Light are to be viewed as the same or different?
Yes, because they both engage in the same activity, and they're both juxtaposed against the Prince of Darkness.
Okay. So I take that to mean then that would indicate to you that they're being used at least roughly synonymously.
It seems that way to me.
Yeah. And it seems that way to me as well. You kind of have the God of Israel and the angel of his truth on one hand, and earlier it talks about the God of knowledge and the Prince of Light. And again, the Prince of Light, the angel of truth, both phrases seem to be referring to the antagonist of the angel of darkness. And it says that in the hand of the Prince of Light is the dominion over all the children of righteousness. So the Prince of Light is over the children of righteousness. And here it says that the angel of his truth helps the children of light. So it's the same sort of talk that it's using here. I find it interesting how it's not the messenger of darkness versus the God of knowledge or the God of Israel. That's not how it sets up the juxtaposition. It's the angel of truth versus the angel of darkness, or the Prince of Light versus the angel of darkness. That's how it kind of sets it up for this. So I think that's important, and I think that viewing this in connection with other texts may help us to understand that better. So are there any other comments on this sentence, the first sentence of the paragraph that we just read? Okay, I think probably not. We've been on for, I think, an hour and 20 minutes now or something like that. So within the next 10 minutes, if we're going to continue on, I'll have to hang up and call back in. The other option is to close off the meeting and continue on next weekend. What are you guys thinking?
Well, I'm really curious about that next sentence, but, you know, if other people want to close off, I'm okay with that too.
Okay, anyone else have a thought one way or the other in terms of if you want to continue on a little bit longer or if you want to close off now?
Me too. I was thinking about the next sentence too. For it is he who created the spirit of light and darkness.
Okay. Well, hey, we have two voices in one direction and no voices in the other. So let us continue. And Heavenly Family, please guide us as we look at this next aspect. So I'll read the sentence here. For it is he, or I think in Hebrew more literally, and he, but it's pretty much the same idea. And he created the spirits of light and darkness, and upon them are built every deed, and upon them are founded every work, and upon their paths all actions. Okay, so we can address the first part of that first. It says, for it is he, or and he, created the spirits of light and darkness. So, any thoughts or comments on that?
Well, it wouldn't make sense that he created a spirit or a living, breathing one to walk in, you know, with the purpose of walking in darkness. You know, so it could, at first glance, into people that don't know what we know, it could sound like that. You know, that he set things up and created evil and, you know, and created good and all that. But we know that's not the case. So, yeah, that's all I know about that.
Okay, well, let me ask you, just because we believe that that's not the case, does that mean that the author or authors of the community rule believe that that's not the case?
Well, no.
Okay, so that's good. I just mentioned this to bring out the principle of how, you know, we often read things in light of our understanding, and if something doesn't make sense to us, and by the way, this isn't necessarily what you were doing, but I want to mention this for the principle. If something doesn't make sense to us, we often seek to interpret it in a way that does make sense to us. But, of course, someone may simply believe something that doesn't make sense to us. So we always have to be open to the possibility that, hey, you know, like in this circumstance, we have to be open to the possibility that whoever wrote the community rule really is teaching that God created basically good and evil. So I hate to leave on a cliffhanger like that, but I'm going to hang up and then call back in. Feel free to discuss things in the meantime. Be right back.
Well, I want to bring up a text from Isaiah 45, verse 7. And it says, well, I'll go back a little bit. Let me go back to 45:5. I am the Lord, and there is none else. There is no God beside me. I girded thee, though thou hast not known me. They that may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is none beside me. I am the Lord, and there is none else. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. So I need to ask him, what does that mean? He created evil. I mean, that's what it says here.
I wonder what it says in the NET.
Yeah, somebody that has an NET, maybe you could look it up. It's Isaiah 45:7.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good first approach is to check the translation.
Obviously.
Okay.
Okay, Trent, we were discussing something, and this is, you're probably very familiar with it. It's Isaiah 45, verse 7. It says, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. So doesn't that kind of go with that? How does that fit in?
Well, we can definitely say that sounds like a parallel passage. I heard someone say something about checking the translation. When someone was saying something about checking the translation, was that in regard to Isaiah or the community rule?
No, Isaiah 45:7, to see if it says something different.
Okay, sure. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was the one who said the thing about the translation. I was just thinking, well, we believe Isaiah to be inspired, and so if there's something in the passage that sounds contrary to what we believe to be truth, then there could be a problem with the translation. It could be mistranslated.
There could be a problem with the translation. Other possibilities to always keep in mind is there could be something wrong with our theology, or there could be something wrong with Isaiah's theology. These are all things to keep in mind. In other words, I mention these things so that it helps us to always approach things honestly without trying to bend things to our perspectives or our current understanding. This is the idea that Ellen White talks of so many times when she says that we ought to approach Scripture with minds free from preconceived ideas. And, she says that we should never take the creed or the tenets of faith of any church to the Bible and interpret it in the light of them and so on. That said,
I guess I really need to hear this because this is the second time I've done it.
Okay. No, it's these are such important principles. That said, with Isaiah 45 verse 7, translation does certainly play a part. But it is interesting. I'll read how it reads in the NET. And I'm sorry if the rain is disturbing any sounds. It started to rain a little bit harder, or at least with larger drops. So if it comes to the point where it's just too hard to hear me or anything like that, you guys be sure to let me know. Okay, so Isaiah 45, verse 7, reading from the NET. I am the one who forms light and creates darkness, the one who brings about peace and creates calamity. I am Yahweh, who accomplishes all these things. And I would say, in looking into this in the past, that this is certainly a far better translation. It's not about creating good and evil in this circumstance. It's bringing about peace and creating calamity. Calamity is a more accurate translation of this word than evil is. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that does change what it says here. So I'm glad you pulled up a different version for us.
Toda Eloheinu. So does that have any impact one way or the other on the community rule, or are there any other thoughts on what this means in the setting of the community rule?
Well, they didn't say anything any worse than what the canon says. That's for sure.
One possible way to... I was going to say, one possible way to look at this is, God is the creator. He created us with free will. He created Satan, who became evil, obviously. But he created us with free will, and some choose light and some choose darkness. But ultimately created each and every one of us.
That's certainly one way to look at it.
I was thinking the same thing earlier. Who created Lucifer? Before he fell, he was sinless, and he chose to go the other way. So the one that created him was the creator. So that maybe that's why they're saying it that way.
Okay, so in Isaiah, it talks about forming light, creating darkness, that sort of thing. And then it kind of explains that by saying the one who brings about peace and creates calamity. So peace and calamity are parallelisms with light and darkness in Isaiah 45, verse 7. So let me ask you guys, is those meanings of light and darkness that we find in Isaiah, is that what light and darkness represents in the community rule?
So in other words, it's talking about the concepts of it's just talking about peace and calamity, basically.
Well, in Isaiah, it's talking about peace and calamity. So the question is that what it's talking about in the community rule? So what is light and darkness in the community rule?
Well, I was just, thinking that if they're parallelism, if light and darkness is peace and calamity, or parallel with peace and calamity in Isaiah, then it very well could be that he's talking about, the writer's talking about peace and calamity here when he says light and darkness.
I think he's talking about righteousness and unrighteousness here.
Okay, so that's representing two perspectives. One perspective is that potentially it's talking about peace and calamity, and the other is that it's talking about righteousness and unrighteousness. Why don't you guys discuss that further and see, which way is it, and how can we determine which way it is?
Well, if you read on down and see that, it talks about every action being founded on them and establishing every deed upon them, then that makes it a little more complicated. It just doesn't seem to be talking about peace and calamity when you go on and see that he loves one everlastingly and delights in the other and its work forever. It's really personifying these two aspects, in my opinion.
Okay. Another aspect or a question that I'll ask in relation to this. Is it possible, we have light and darkness in both in Isaiah and here in the community rule. Just because Isaiah uses it in one way, does that mean that the community rule is using it in the same way, or could it be using it in a different way?
It could be a different way.
the follow-up question to that is, how do we determine how these words are used in the community rule?
You know, it's talking about righteousness in the paragraph right before, so it would kind of make sense that we'd still be talking about, in those kind of terms.
When I first read this, and if you include verse 6 of Isaiah 45, he was talking about the rising of the sun and so on. And then verse 7, he says, I formed the light and create darkness. I thought it was just talking about the regular old light and regular old darkness.
Okay, very interesting.
But yeah, we don't know. There's no reason. I don't think it's extremely reasonable to think that just because Isaiah used these terms and paralleled them with something else, that we can assume that this author is using it in the same way. I think that's the question you asked.
For sure, yeah. And then the follow-up question is, how can we determine the way in which the author or authors of the community rule are using it? And Ed mentioned one thing of, the previous paragraph, it's talking about righteousness and unrighteousness, so it seems like this would be the same. And I'll expand on that a little bit. Really, this whole section of the community rule, and even before this section, it's been using these symbols of light and darkness. It's been using it all along in the community rule, and it's been equating light with truth and darkness with falsehood. And with truth comes righteousness, and with falsehood comes unrighteousness. And so those things are certainly all bound up together. And so I would say that just going back even over everything that we've read so far in the community rule, it becomes quite clear that light and darkness are being used as symbols of good and evil, truth and error, righteousness and unrighteousness. You have the sons of light and the sons of darkness, the children of righteousness and the children of wickedness, the angel of light, the angel or the prince of light, and the angel of darkness. You have all these things contrasted. And so I think that it's quite clear within the community rule that this is talking about truth and error, good and evil, righteousness and unrighteousness, those sorts of ideas being encapsulated within the symbols of light and darkness. So then the other question is, when it's talking about the spirits of light and darkness, what is that?
I think it's just talking about created beings.
Okay, any other perspectives, or anyone want to share that same perspective?
That's what I thought at first, but I don't know. So I'm just wondering if it's not, if it's not more of a concept, or I can't think of the word. A construct.
Well, it's talking, again, from that paragraph previous, it starts off with, he has created man to govern the world. He has appointed for him two spirits in which to walk until the time of his visitation, the spirits of truth and injustice. So, sort of keeping that parallel, this he would be the same creator, and these spirits, would be, man, and is what he created to govern the world. And we've got, again, light and darkness, which would be truth and injustice, or good and evil, or righteousness and unrighteousness.
So in the first instance, going back when it talks about creating mankind to rule the world and appointing for them two spirits, are the two spirits in that instance being equated with humanity?
No, I guess not. Well, It's two ways of humanity, I suppose.
Sure, yeah, two ways within which they may walk. And those two spirits are truth and falsehood. So are truth and falsehood being spoken of as beings, or are they principles?
I think they're principles there, so yeah.
But I liked it a lot better. I'm sorry. I liked it a lot better when they were appointed for us, rather than the idea that he created those principles. But there again, like you said, I'm imposing what I think about it, rather than just seeing what he plainly said. So I probably need to be quiet.
No, you don't have to be quiet. And I'll mention too, often, on conference calls, just the setup of things, it's so common for us, many of us to end up saying something at the same time just because, hey, we can't see each other's faces. We're all participating in the discussion. And, often when people end up interrupting each other or speaking at the same time, people apologize, and that's totally fine. But I just wanted to mention for no one to feel bad about it, because it's just the nature of being on a conference call like this that, hey, we're talking, we're discussing things, we can't see each other, so we're automatically going to end up trying to say things at the same time, and that's perfectly all right. So this here, I could say, I think that we can discern that, okay, light and darkness are certainly being spoken of as truth and falsehood, righteousness, unrighteousness, those sorts of things, and that the spirits of light and darkness are talking about the principles of truth and error, and the principles of righteousness and unrighteousness. So what does that leave us with?
I think when you boil it down, it's almost like the only two potential outcomes of free will. You can either choose righteousness or unrighteousness. So in essence, God, by creating, we're looking at this like, wow, he created evil, but what he created was free will. And in creating free will, there's only two options.
Okay. What I'm going to do, and I'm sure that everyone on the call now knows by now that one of my duties that I have is to ask questions and to cause people to think on things in different ways and to think very deeply about things. So I'm going to have to ask some more questions on these topics, and the purpose of it is to get us all thinking deeply about these things. Did God create free will?
Well, we're made in his nature, so he is free will.
Okay, so if God is free will, or God inherently has free will within him, then is free will a created thing?
I don't think it's created. I think it's just part of who we are, processes of our minds and choices that we make.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily follows that because that's an attribute of his that he created it.
I think he could have created things that don't have free will. Like, I think there's probably creatures on the earth, I'm not sure of that, but I think there's probably creatures on the earth that really are just driven by instinct alone. They don't really have free will. He could have created us that same way.
Then what's the difference of free will versus instinct then?
Hey, Rebecca, I'm sorry, I ended up kind of talking at the same time as you, and I missed part of what you said. Would you mind repeating it, please?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you.
That's fine.
My question was, then what is the difference between free will and instinct?
Free will is a cognitive process where we sort of go through an if-then-else kind of process in our brain, where instinct is just a natural, I guess it's an automated if then else. It's an if then, no else.
Well, like give me an example of that, if you would.
I'm getting wet from rain. I'm going to go into my shelter.
No, I just want to understand an example of that. Could you give me an example? Like I have a dog, okay, and my dog still has free will. If I ask it to do something, it still can decide if it wants to do that or not. So I'm not sure I can understand where you're coming from with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if a dog's the greatest example, because I think dogs have some free will decision-making capabilities. But, there's animals, maybe simpler, like a worm or something. They get wet because it's raining. They know to go either above ground or below ground or whatever their instinct might be. They don't make choices based on cognitive reasoning. They just make choices based on what's happening. I shouldn't even say choices. They just react. Instinct is a reaction as opposed to a decision.
I think that's... you go ahead.
Sorry. No, you go ahead.
Too late, Carol.
Really?
You're going to have to.
Well, but you might need to comment on the instinct and free will thing, and I was going to go off a little bit. I was just going to address a little bit different issue.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to say that I think that that's a helpful distinction to say that instinct is reaction, whereas free will is decision. I think that's helpful to understand the ideas. However, I'll say that I still don't know where, the categories that we have of decision and reaction, and to take that to kind of the broader aspects that we're considering right now of instinct and free will. I don't know how those categories that we have really play out in the real world, and if sharp lines can be drawn between them. Like, for instance, this is partly to do with questions like, what exactly is consciousness? Is it just awareness? That's, it seems to be the most basic definition of it. And perhaps consciousness isn't even a helpful word. But it's kind of like, does it boil down to the extent to which information is processed, or the amount of awareness of that processed information? And when we talk about awareness, what part of us or what part of a thing has to be aware? There are things that our bodies do all the time without us consciously thinking of those things and causing them to happen, but other parts of our brain that are not responsible for our I don't know what the right word for this is exactly, but basically it's a separate part of our brain from the part of our brain that is responsible for thinking with words. So we have the part of our brain that is intellectually processing words, and we think things through with those parts of our brain, but we have other parts of our brain that are actually aware of, our hearts beating and things like that, and are controlling those things. And it's just, we have different parts of us aware of different things. And so while I could say, well, this, the part that's thinking with words is unconscious of the other part, so therefore, I'm not consciously aware of those things. But that's just speaking from the perspective of that part of my brain. Whereas the other part of my brain, to it is consciously aware of the heartbeat and this and that. But the other things, thinking with words and all of that, is not part of the conscious awareness of that part of the brain. So it's just awareness of different things in different ways. And there's certain things that our bodies do, like if you touch something really hot, you might pull away really quick before the thinking, or the part of your brain that thinks with words, I'll say, you'll pull away before you realize it was that. You can have reactions like that. But again, it's still thought process that's happening. It's just a different kind of thought process. And even you have plants, and how plants will, if you damage a plant, it will start to repair itself. It'll send, just much like our bodies do, we'll form a scab. Well, plants form something like a scab. There's probably a different word for it, but there's healing that happens, and there's communication from one part of the plant to another part of the plant. Sure, plants don't have brains, and plants don't have a mechanism, so far as we know, to think in the way that we think, but there's awareness. And so with that, it's kind of like, where exactly do you draw the line between a decision and a reaction? I'm not saying that there isn't a difference. When I think about it, it seems like there's a great difference between the two. But it's something that I wonder about in terms of all of that relates to awareness. And is it just different parts, when it comes to humans, different parts of us aware of different things? And then how do I categorize that in a way that actually reflects what is happening? And then when it comes to other organisms, what is it actually like? Is there any choice at all? And I know that some people believe that that we actually don't have choice, that our experience of choice is an illusion. I think there were some tests done where someone was supposed to either say yes or no to different questions, and they had all these things hooked up to their brain, and it turned out that before they were aware of it, their brain had already decided yes or no, like I think on average 6 seconds before they were aware of it. Now, to some people, that just means that, oh, well, then we must not be choosing, because our brain is already geared to either yes or no before we even think about it. But the problem with that is that is just assuming that we are only composed of the part of us that is thinking with words. So it could simply be that another part of us that's not thinking with words is actually choosing, and we are actually choosing in that, and then, because that's just as much a part of us as the part of our brain that thinks with words. And so perhaps we choose with that first, and then we catch up with the other part of our brain, so to speak, but it's no less our choice, that sort of thing. And so if that's the case, then when another creature without the a means to think with words, is it also able to choose, but just not able to process its choices or think about its choices in the way that we do? Again, these are things I don't know the answers to. I don't know where all of that goes, but I figured it's worth expressing kind of the questions, at least, as it may relate to this sort of thing. So anyways, I know that kind of took a little bit of a detour there, but I hope that that's good food for thought for people anyway. Are there any comments or questions about that or on other aspects of the things that have been brought up?
Well, I have a comment about free will. And it seems to me that it's possible that free will is, I don't know if you would call it a principle, an aspect of the universe that, God didn't need to create. It's just the way things naturally are. Just a thought, because I'm thinking, if that's the case, free will that's the way things should be. That's the status quo, and what stops that is when somebody tries to force their will on you, and that is something that only happened, it seems to me, when Satan rebelled. He's the one who forces his will on people and tries to keep them from at least thinking that they have free will. I mean, anyway, just a thought about that.
There's something that I want to tag on to that as well. A while back, we talked about a robot that had been made that basically demonstrated self-awareness, where there's 3 robots that were sitting on a table, and they did not have pre-programmed responses. They were given a vocabulary. They were given certain sensory inputs. They could sense certain things, feel certain things or whatever. And they were asked, basically there was a guy who would push a button on the top of their head. And it was, I think it referred to it as a dumbing pill or something like that. And the idea is that when he would push the button, he was actually muting them so they were not able to talk. So the guy would, he took these 3 robots, set them on the table, he touched each of their heads, and he pushed the button on 2 of their heads, and one of them he didn't. And then he said, I think he asked them, which one of you did I not give the dumbing pill to? And they all stood up, and of course, 2 of them couldn't speak, so they stood up as if they were about to speak, but 2 of them couldn't because they had been given it. And the one who hadn't been given it, the one who wasn't muted, stood up and did speak and said, I don't know. And it seems like they all would have said something like, I don't know. So who didn't I give it to? Well, I don't know. But when the one said, I don't know, it then heard itself speaking and realized that it had spoken, and then it knew the answer to the question. So it said, I'm sorry, I spoke incorrectly. It was me. Now, that was not a programmed response. It just had the kind of the basic building blocks in place to, it had a vocabulary and it had sensory input. And those things, and, enabled it, without pre-programming it for this, to have self-awareness. I think that that's very profound. So that makes me wonder if what Carol is saying is true, that, potentially just something being aware and being given words, being given that sort of thinking, and maybe even without words, but maybe just something having a certain level of complexity or something like that enables self-awareness and potentially even choice. If that robot can be self-aware, who's to say that the robot couldn't choose? If a robot can be self-aware, then couldn't a robot, have interests like self-preservation and things like that? And if so, then you would think that choices would be possible. So, I don't know how that all works, and if it is possible that God could have made us basically how we are, except without choice, or maybe that's impossible. Maybe it's just part of what goes along with being a complex being. So, anyways, any other thoughts?
It seems to me that that's removing free will. Like, that's moving into predetermination.
How so?
If we're just whatever stimuli we're fed, we're going to react in a certain way. That's not. Then we have no free will, and the outcome is already decided by the stimuli that's been given to us.
Okay. In the way that I was thinking of it, and if I expressed things in a way that seemed to convey the wrong idea, then I apologize for that. But I haven't been thinking of things in terms of just responding to stimuli. I've just been thinking about it in terms of the building blocks necessary for free will may simply be complexity to a certain degree and self-awareness or something like that, and depending on how you determine what self-awareness is, because again, that's kind of, I'm not sure if we have a clear understanding of what self-awareness is, but to me that doesn't lean in the direction of determinism or anything like that. It's just saying that it may be the case that having free will is a natural part of being a complex being, but it's not necessarily just responding to stimuli in any sort of automated sense. It's just complexity carrying with it free will. I don't know if that helps at all. Does it?
I think so. I think I need to ponder it further.
Yeah, I think I need to ponder it further too. It's one of those subjects. It's yeah. I mean, I do not understand it as well as I would like to, and obviously it's an important subject. But I don't see any reason to deny free will. For instance, like, we experience what seems like free will, and we have all gone through something where we have, maybe thought we were going to choose something, and then we end up changing our mind and deciding something else and things like that. And we can be in a point of decision and really contemplate and then just choose one thing over the other. And perhaps in another circumstance that was very similar, we chose the other thing, and we just had a change in the way of thinking. So, the experience that we have of free will, I don't know if it's even possible for that to be an illusion. It seems so evident, and we verify it by repeated experiment. I mean, we make choices all the time. Like, I'll just give you guys an example. Right now, I'm going to choose to count from 1 to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. As I was talking, in my mind, I was contemplating, okay, am I going to count to 10? And it was like, yes, no, yes. I choose yes. Well, if the experience of that, free will is just essentially the label that we put on that experience. And so it's kind of, to say that it's not free will is kind of just to, it seems to me that to say something like that is not free will would just be to say that we don't like the label that we put on that experience. But the experience is what it is. I mean, we actually choose to do one thing versus doing another thing. And this happens with very insignificant things, like me choosing to count to 10 just then. And it happens with huge things, like things that impact our lives dramatically. So I think that the evidence overwhelmingly, and in fact,
absolutely confirming shows that we do have free will. And I think it's just a matter of, what is the mechanism of that, and what are the necessary elements that need to be in place for something to have free will. And those are the things that I don't really know.
Back to the robot thing, which is so intriguing. And I don't know much about robots at all, but so this robot the experiment that you just mentioned, the robot was not really choosing. He was deducing something. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't really, we weren't asking the robot, do you want strawberry or vanilla, and having him choose which one he would want. He was more doing like an equation,
I would call it deductive reasoning.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, I don't know if that's so much, because you can program. You had mentioned this before. One of the first things I ever listened to your messages about God not knowing the future necessarily. I mean, he has a great idea, just like I know that if, you start messing around with drugs, you're going to become addicted. I can pretty much know that without knowing it for sure. But that, that you could program a computer game to a determined end. And if someone, if God is playing against this computer game that he programmed, then that's, of course, if he won the great controversy, then there's no glory in that, because he set it up for that end, But if he sets it up, with free will, I understand why he gave us free will, but it seems like he could also not have done that, just like someone could program a computer game, to make determined moves based on a set of circumstances, like deductive reasoning, like Rebecca said, or just any computer programming is basically not really choosing, but when this happens, this is what you do,
Right. So something can certainly be programmed in that way. So I guess the question that I have is, once you kind of raise the bar of what you give to a computer, does that automatically end up bringing in aspects of free will? Because in the instance with the robot, it's true that that's not really an example of choice, at least not in the fullest sense, but it is an example of self-awareness. Because if he's able to deduce that, and that it's, oh, wait, no, I was the person. Well, wait, what do you mean you? So he has an awareness of, that robot had awareness of itself as distinct from the things around it and the other robots. And the thing is, just having that in itself and being able to say, and even one of the things that I find interesting is that it apologized. It basically confessed that it was wrong, said that it was sorry, and said that it was him. And that, in one sense you could call it choice, because it chose those words. So why those words over other words? It wasn't programmed to say those words. It was just programmed to have a wide vocabulary and to be able to sense certain things. And so when you have that in place, it had self-awareness, and it expressed its self-awareness using the words that it did, and for some reason apologized for getting it wrong when it first responded saying, I don't know.
Trent?
So it's yep.
Maybe he was programmed, maybe the robot was programmed to be polite. And since he had the vocabulary, he chose the words, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, programmed to be polite, you could say hypothetically that's possible, but that would, to program a robot to be polite
all I can think of is programming it to have a set of possible responses to certain things that it would categorize as polite responses. But this wasn't programmed with set responses. And even then, let's say it's programmed to be polite, whatever that would mean.
Right,
but even then, if it's not programmed to have set responses, why express it in that way? It's kind of like, is that choice? And if it's not choice, to end up selecting the words that it did, and clearly it selected something coherent rather than just a random word generator. It selected things that are coherent, made sense in the context, and even went as far as expressing self-awareness. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, if that isn't choice, then what is it? And if it isn't choice, then what is choice? You have kind of questions like that.
Yeah, that's a fascinating experiment. I've read that. I've read about that robot experiment one other time. Or you mentioned it before, but I heard that before. It was really...
Yeah, I've mentioned it.
Yeah, it must have been you then. Very fascinating how that could come about.
Yeah, and one of the things that it shows is that self-awareness and what we think of as thought does not require a special part of us that only humans have, like a soul or a spirit or things like that, as many people think. This is a purely physical machine, and selects words that make sense, expresses self-awareness, and things like that. So again, I don't know all the answers to kind of the mechanism of free will and all of that. But these things do make one wonder how all this comes about. And again, just to kind of wrap things or to tie things back to our discussion of the community rule, the reason why we're discussing this to begin with is because of the phrase that God created light and darkness, and light and darkness, the spirits of light and darkness. And the spirits of light and darkness are the principles of truth and error, or the principles of righteousness and unrighteousness, good and evil, that sort of thing. And so one of the possible explanations of that is that God created things with free will, and free will brought about those things. So you could say that wouldn't be God directly creating good and evil. That would be God creating other things that brought about good and evil, which you could say in an indirect sense that God created good and evil. So then that is what brought up this whole discussion of free will, and if free will was created, and I think that we've concluded that if God himself is a free will agent, then he didn't create free will itself, just like God didn't create time itself, or space itself, or morality itself, different things like that. And I think that we can just as reasonably conclude that God did not create a number of things, itself. God did not create complexity itself. God did not create free will itself. That said, you could say that God created certain beings to have free will, if it's possible for God to have just created us to have free will or not. And then the other thought is, if free will is a natural result of certain designs, then you could just say that God made free will agents. Instead of making things to have free will, he made things that do have free will. So you could, either way, you could still say that God created the things that ended up bringing about darkness, and in an indirect sense then God being responsible for creating darkness. So that's one possibility, again, regardless of how free will actually works and whether it's an inherent property or an emerging property of certain designs, or whether it is something that God could either just choose to bestow upon something or not. So that's a possibility of understanding the community rule in that way. But then we still have the question of, is that what the writer or writers of the community rule intend to get across? And there are, of course, more aspects to this whole discussion. Something that we haven't really discussed yet is, what does it mean for God to create? And of course, and this is in the context of this statement in the community rule, but it would be beneficial for the sake of this sentence to understand the idea in a broader sense. And of course, in investigating the community rule and comparing other texts, well, we'd have to see, is the community rule using the word create in a different way as other texts? And so if there are other texts that we're going to use to illuminate our understanding of the community rule, we have to have a justifiable connection between the texts. But I don't think we're going to have time to go through all of that tonight, because it's already getting late and we've been on for quite a while already, over 2 hours. So we'll have to continue that aspect next weekend. And everyone, you're all encouraged to look into it in the meantime. But are there any last comments or questions before we draw this meeting to a close?
I have one last comment on the issue of free will. As I think about it, it seems that it might be the case that free will is, well, you know, like I said, it's just the status quo. It's, you know, maybe there isn't such a thing as the opposite of free will. So it's not that God, you know, He's creating mankind, and He thought, let's see, should I give them free will or should I not give them free will? You know, maybe that's not even a concept that would enter His brain. Maybe it's the issue that the enemy of our souls set this up as a straw dog. I think I'm using the right term. But, you know, brought into our minds in connection with God that, well, this God just created you and then He's in control of every little thing, and you have no free will. So there's that idea. And then to combat that idea, then, you know, there's, well, but there could, you know, but maybe there is free will. And so then people decide what they think God had in His mind, you know, when He created mankind and how He deals with us. You know, the devil is the one who, again, tries to take away our free will, but he can't. Really, it seems to me that there is not such a thing as not having free will, at least in you know, the physical plane. And what I see, I mean, like the devil just tries to make you think that you don't have free will. And if you think that you don't have free will, then that just changes everything. It changes how you live your life and, you know, what you choose to study and think about, and changes everything. But the reality of it is, you know, you really, I mean, I suppose with certain types of brainwashing, MK Ultra, you know, and that type of thing, that comes close to maybe taking somebody's free will. But, you know, I mean, the seven brothers and their mother showed that, you know, even if you're going to kill somebody, that person still has free will. So that's my tangent on free will.
Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting indeed.
Yeah, I like that. And then I have one more question. We don't have to answer it tonight. But with this, back to this robot thing, that when the robot said he was sorry, does that mean that the robot had feelings? You know, that and I don't know. The whole thing is really blowing my mind. And I liked your summary, Carol. It was very good. So that's all.
Yeah, and on that, I think it's an excellent question, by the way. And I'll just say hypothetically, and even if whatever the case may be with this particular robot, I have to say it's entirely possible. I mean, we have feelings, and we are what you might refer to as biological machines. We're entirely physical mechanisms and all of that, and we have feelings. And so I don't think that there's a reason to think that something else couldn't if it had a similar enough design to us, just because it's made of different materials. I mean, even just the different materials that make up living organisms. I mean, a while ago I came across something where there's a certain type of sea creature who has either one eye or however many eyes, and the material of their eyes, it's literally a type of rock, and their eyes are made of this type of rock. And they so far as is presently known, they don't see with the detail we do, but they can actually perceive differences in light and things like that visually, and their eyes are made of rock. And it's like, that's a type of material that you would never suspect to be capable of that sort of thing, but evidently it is. And so, there's already people walking around with part of their brain having been replaced with a computer. I mean, computer technology and our brains are already close enough. We have electricity going through our brains and so on. It's already close enough that people can interface these two separate things. And if you can interface them, and people who have, it's often like if they had been in a really bad accident or suffered bad brain damage in one way or another, they've had certain parts of their brains replaced by computers. And to them, that computer, when asked, that computer is just as much a part of them as the part of the brain that it replaced was when they had it. And so it's just like, yeah, it seems, the material itself doesn't necessarily make a huge difference so long as it is capable of doing the things that it needs to do.
Yeah, thank you. So interesting.
Yeah, that rock in those eyes is selenium. It's the same thing that's used in the xerographic process, where light hits it and it changes its electric charge. So that's what's happening is light hits the selenium rock of their eyes and changes the charge, sending the signal to the brain that light is being received.
Absolutely fascinating.
Wow, interesting.
Okay. Well, if there are any other comments, feel free to mention it. But we won't have a long pause again waiting. So if anyone does have a comment, you'll have to just make yourself known. Otherwise, would anyone like to volunteer to close off with prayer?
I will. Dear Heavenly Family, we just thank you so much for this fellowship. We thank you for all you're teaching us. And we thank you for being so patient with us as we're learning how to think differently than we ever have before. And so thank you for giving us the tools that we need to be able to recognize the truth and recognize error. And we thank you so much for these principles. And I just ask that you would bless us all as we contemplate these things and continue to study the community rule and bind us all together in love. I ask these things in the name of Branch. Amen.
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 Amen. Good
All right,
night,
well,
everyone. God's blessing.
Good night.
Amen. Love you all. Have a good night.
Hope you guys
Good night.